Thank you everybody who's here. As was previously said, if you have questions or comments throughout the presentation, you're welcome to throw those into the comments box. I'm going to try to move fairly rapidly to make sure that we have plenty of time at the end for at least some discussion, because what I'm presenting might be really useful to you, or it might be really useful, but only if you modify it in particular ways. And I would like that feedback, and I know other people here would also like that sort of feedback. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And can you all verify for me that you are seeing a whole bunch of chickens?
Yep.
All right, I got a thumbs up on the chickens, great.
Yep.
So really quick to introduce myself, I am Emily Cam. I'm Assistant Professor of Theology at the College of St. Mary in Omaha. Like basically every other school in the nation, we pivoted very, very quickly to online learning last term, but I've had prior experiences with Canvas, and even though online learning hasn't necessarily been my specialty, I did have a lot of fun this spring and summer when I was teaching a summer course, trying to find different ways to keep students engaged. And this Easter egg concept is one of the things that has popped out of that. So obviously I do teach at the college level, so not everything is perhaps going to be useful in the same way to all different levels, but that's something that I would really like it if people could engage, especially when we get to sort of the end of the presentation, to tell me what would kind of work for a different age group or a different style of learning, because I think there's some fun to be had in this concept of Easter eggs, and we can all use it a little bit differently. So let me start off by talking very quickly about what Easter eggs actually are. If you are a gamer, if you have played a lot of video games, you probably have heard this term. If you don't game, this is probably, you can probably figure out what it means, but it might be a little bit more foreign to you. It is a term from video games and gaming, and it refers to hidden items or hidden content that's only meant to be found by really close watchers. So depending on the game, depending on the context, the hidden content could be credits, it could be extra music, it could be an extra level, it could be just something silly that's going on in the background. In high school, I played a game called Diablo 2 that had a secret cow level where you went to fight a whole bunch of really mean cows. It wasn't something you could unlock easily, but if you were paying really, really close attention, it was something where you could fulfill the terms and then get that extra content. Now, sometimes these things are about deepening the lore of the game or making the story more cohesive, but oftentimes they're just fun and they're just funny. And that's kind of what I'm jumping off of when I'm talking about Easter eggs, mostly the fun and the humorous. So why am I talking about Easter eggs today? I think Easter eggs can do a few different things for us. One is to try to create a less intimidating class atmosphere. I teach theology. Theology is, I'll just say it's not the most popular class when people find out that they have to take it because they're going to a Catholic college. So students tend to be a little bit split. They frequently are just intimidated because they've never taken a course in theology or religious studies before, and they don't know what it's like. They don't know what the teaching style is. They don't know what kind of things they're going to have to memorize or what kind of assignments they're going to do. Plenty of them are just straight up ticked off because, as I say on the first day of class to most of them, the only thing you know about this class is that you probably would not have taken it if you had a choice. And that's fine with me. But I want to make sure I get through those first few days and weeks with students not feeling terrified by the class that they're in. So Easter eggs are one of the ways that I use to make the class seem a little bit less scary than it otherwise might. This is also a way I try to show my personality as a teacher and a professor. You probably can already pick up that I tend to be a little bit on the goofier side. I try to be very approachable. I try to be kind of funny. Sometimes the jokes land, sometimes they don't. But that's part of kind of demystifying the field that I'm teaching in, and that's also just part of the style of how I teach. So Easter eggs have given me a chance to portray a little bit more of myself in that public space. I also think that showing personality can be an interesting challenge online because online course pages, they can feel a little bit sterile. Even if you've used all kinds of images and all kinds of engagement, it's possible that students are clicking in. You have to make that value judgment between making things look exciting and interesting and pretty, and making sure that they're really easy to navigate. And it's not always easy to achieve both. So these are smaller ways that you can try to kind of combat that sterility or that sort of flat page that I think is especially helpful when you're teaching online. The last thing, and this is kind of the whole point of the presentation, is that I think Easter eggs can be really helpful for measuring student engagement, to figure out what it is that students are looking at, what it is they're not looking at. I know that I'm not the only person who really asked that question, especially in the fall. I'm posting all this content, but how do I know they're engaging with it? How do I know that they're paying attention? So this was some of what I came up with. I'm going to give you two larger examples, things that I've actually tried in my classes and I've found successful, and then a couple of examples that are still things I'm sort of piloting. So the first one is the chicken count. Now, if you read the description that was posted, you might have a pretty good idea of what I mean by the chicken count, but you also might be wondering how exactly I pulled that off. So what's going to follow are a few slides that I've pulled from presentations that I did in summer classes talking about dietary practices in various religions. So when I record PowerPoints on VidGrid, I have my own voiceover, and then I advance the slides like everybody does to match my voice. So let's say I've got a slide like this on Hindu vegetarianism. So I'm going to be advancing the slide, putting up content, going over each thing, and then right at the end, I throw up a chicken. And this chicken was actually fairly carefully considered. I picked a chicken that I thought would blend in with the visuals that were already on the page, and that wasn't going to be too obtrusive. And generally, when I'm advancing a slide like this, I'll throw up the chicken, but I'm not going to give it longer than a couple of seconds on the slide before I advance to the next slide. It just kind of pops out of nowhere, and honestly, the reaction I want students to have was just, wait, was that a chicken? And then they're kind of paying attention to the rest of the presentation again. But even that first little bit can cue them in a way that they might not have been before. Just that wondering, did I just see a chicken? Was that a chicken? Maybe I'll back up and look at that chicken again. Maybe that wasn't a chicken. Maybe I'm just hallucinating chickens. I'm okay with students having that little moment of being extra engaged because they're not sure what just happened. So then I might advance a few slides that have nothing to do with chickens, or with just kind of go on with the content as normal. And then a few slides later, okay, I'm advancing my text, and then right at the end, chicken. Again, not really obtrusive. You can certainly notice it, but not something I'm going to leave on the screen for a really long period of time. Now, my practice, and again, I've done this chicken count thing twice, both times to really good success, actually, is I try to make the chickens less and less subtle throughout the presentation. So by the end, by the last couple of slides, I usually just throw up the chicken slide, and I advance past it really, really quickly so that everyone's going, okay, wait, what? That was definitely a chicken, but I don't know why there was a chicken. So all of that is confusing and fun, but how does it help me actually advance some of my course goals? Well, I then move on to evaluating, did people spot chickens or did they not spot any chickens? This is, again, a way of trying to figure out who's paying attention and who's not, and in what ways they're paying attention. So when I need to find out if people have spotted some chickens, I've done this a couple of ways. At the end of a presentation, I've put an extra slide and said, okay, here's a bunch of the stuff you have to do for the next week. You have to do these assignments. Hey, but if you email me to tell me how many chickens you saw in this presentation and you get it right, I'll give you a point of extra credit. That is a strategy I used, especially this summer when I had a smaller course, and I had students who were only encountering me online. So I hadn't had that previous experience of being able to kind of establish myself as a warm approachable professor. So part of this chicken assignment was to get students to email me to know that they could contact me, and to make them practice that skill set, because for whatever reason, it seems like once a student emails you one time, they do a little bit better emailing you again. I've also done this presentation where I have integrated the question into the VidGrid presentation. So VidGrid would not let the rest of the video advance until they had answered the question at the end. How many chickens did you see in this presentation? The one thing I do particularly like about this modification is that it lets you put in answers to the specific questions. So I can tell them right away if they'd gotten the right number of chickens or not. And also had a moment of being able to have some fun with them. If they chose 8 chickens and there were not 8 chickens, I can put up a message saying, you know what, there's only 6 chickens. Just FYI, you might be hallucinating chickens. We're all really stressed right now. If you see more chickens in the future that you don't think should be there, maybe let somebody know or go take a nap. So all of that hopefully is kind of funny. I think it's kind of funny. I can't tell if you think it's funny because you all have your microphones off, so I have no idea if you're laughing or not, or just rolling your eyes and wondering why you came to this presentation. But let me talk really quickly about why I bother. Why would I set this kind of thing up in a formal PowerPoint presentation? Well, my number one reason is going to be it's fun. And that seems a little surface level, I think, at the start, until you remember some of the, well, let me put it this way. One of my favorite mentors going into my career as a teacher told me multiple times that if you can play as a teacher, as a professor, then your students have more fun too. If you are engaged and if you're entertaining yourself, it's more likely that your students are going to notice that you are fully present, that you're there, and that you're having a good time. Beyond that, this is also kind of a self-care thing. If we are having fun, especially teaching in a way that we're not fully comfortable with, then it's a little bit of stress relief. It's a little bit of something to look forward to. And I think that it's worthwhile for us as teachers and as professors to find those things that give us a little bit of extra energy in life, especially when we're used to getting so much of that energy from the students that we're around. And I tell you what, Googling funny chickens produces pretty interesting results. I got to see a chicken in a tutu today, and I would say that's better than a day that I didn't see a chicken in a tutu. I am spotting, I think that there's some chat going on, but I'm not able to see it on my screen right now. So if there's questions or comments that you want to be answered right at the moment, you're welcome to turn on your mic and jump on in. But that's just the first reason about why I bother. Let's go on to some more academically informed reasons. I want to incentivize close watching among my students. When they're watching a PowerPoint presentation the way I make them, I want them to be paying attention all the way through, just like it was a course lecture. I can't do that in all the same ways that I would check in a course lecture. You know, I can't walk closer to the person who seems to be dozing off. I can't make ridiculous hand gestures. I don't have as many options, or I don't have the same options on an online environment that I would to make sure that my students are paying close attention. So in this case, throwing up something a little bit unexpected in a presentation, making them giggle a little bit, it might encourage them to watch a bit more closely. Secondarily, because I offer extra credit for these sorts of things, it incentivizes rewatching. I do have those students who are very interested or really desperately need every point they can possibly scrape up. And so I will have some students who go back and watch the entire presentation again to double check. They will go see how many chickens they can find because they really want their answer to be right. And even though they're paying attention to the chickens at that time, they're also re-engaging with the material. They're still hearing that, they're still seeing the material go through, and then hopefully it reinforces those things. Finally, one of the things that I found most helpful is that you kind of get a glimpse of students who might be listening without watching, or who are trying to multitask when they're engaging with something like a course lecture. And this is not necessarily a bad thing. I don't necessarily think it's realistic to expect that students will just be locked in and staring at their screen the entire time that you're giving a presentation. But if you know that a lot of students responded to the chicken count, but most of them got it wrong, you have that idea of okay, a lot of students are listening, but they're not necessarily watching. That gives you a hint of saying, okay, well, in the next lecture, if I know that there's an image on screen that's really important, if there's a graph that I want them to notice, then I want to say that out loud so that if students are listening and not watching all that closely, that they have that cue, okay, I need to look at my screen right now. Also, it could be that you really don't want them to multitask because you're going over really difficult stuff. And in that case, you can say so, or you can contact students. You have just that little bit of extra information about how engaged are they with that particular video. So that's the chicken count. And I would say that's probably my most entertaining example. But the concept of Easter eggs, I've expanded outward in a few different ways. So the second example that I used, and this is pulling screenshots from a summer course, is fact hunting, or using Easter eggs within text. And this, I think, is a pretty easy example. It's a really easy one to set up. And it has a couple of uses. So probably a lot of courses that you teach, there's some huge terrifying assignment that students have to get through. And so they get to a course page and it looks like this. It is just a giant wall. It's a block of text. They scroll down, there's even more text. They scroll down, there's this giant rubric, and oh my God, there's even more rubric. And you kind of do want to over-explain in these things because you want the students to have all this information. But you're also recognizing that this looks like a lot. And when I have assignments like this, I'm worried about a couple of things. The first is that students are going to be absolutely overloaded by the amount of information that they're getting, and also that they're just going to be plain old anxious because they're seeing something big and intimidating and they're not entirely sure how it's going to go. And so they get scared. So how can an Easter egg help alleviate this? Here's one that I've used. In a task for a summer course, I told them, okay, you have to go look at this final paper assignment page. You have to pick a topic. You have to tell me what that topic is. And then I say at the end there, I've also included extra text telling you what color my house is. If you can find that text and email me the correct color of my house, you get a point of extra credit. I also underlined this first little bit because this is something I do with college students very regularly. I tell them exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing. When I've done the chicken count, I've told them, hey, I'm doing this to see if I can kind of gauge how close of attention that you're paying. In this case, I say, yeah, I want you to read the assignment sheet closely. So I'm going to literally give you points if you can indicate to me that you probably have. So the way that plays out is that right at the end of the list of possible topics, I've got this tiny little piece of text saying my house is blue. I did this at the very end of the assignment, of course, to hopefully ensure that students are reading the entire assignment before they notice it. But there it is. And then they email me, they can get some extra credit, etc. It's hopefully good for them and good for me. But why do I bother? Well, the first thing again is it's fun. Went over why I think fun is important in this kind of thing. Same particular rules apply. I also like this kind of Easter egg because I think that giving students a particular task to mess around with can help mitigate some of their anxiety. If you're telling them, look for one thing right now, I only want you to focus on one thing at this moment, gives them a sense of purpose, it gives them a focal point, and maybe that giant wall of text doesn't seem quite as terrifying once they've broken it down a little bit. I'm trying to encourage close and careful reading. It's not easy for me to say for sure if all the students were absorbing all of the assignment material while they're looking for the color of my house, but I don't think it could really hurt. And finally, this is one where I think I learned more from the students who did not bother with this Easter egg than the ones who did. At my school, we have a lot of single parents who matriculate through our courses. We have a lot of students who work in healthcare. And I noticed that the students who did not bother to complete this particular Easter egg were often ones that I had already been watching a little bit because I thought they might be kind of stressed or pressed for time. Those were the ones that I knew to watch more closely because their stress level was likely to be a bit higher. So for me, this particular Easter egg was helpful in just saying who's going to go that tiny extra step to do a little bit more work for a few more points. And if they don't, what does that tell me about their engagement with the course and how they're doing overall? So I'm going to give you a couple of miscellaneous examples here too, just things that I've tried in the past but haven't used multiple times, or things that I'm piloting in the fall. I put Easter eggs in my syllabus now. Here's a little sample from my feedback policy, mentioning how quickly I get back to people and telling them useful information. I go to bed at 10 p.m. My deadlines are set at midnight. If you email me right before the midnight deadline, you're probably not going to get a reply from me until the next day. First of all, this shows a little bit of personality. It makes the syllabus a little bit less dry because syllabi do have a tendency to be extraordinarily boring to read. And I've also sometimes tried to incentivize these by making the first quiz, if you have any of these sort of objective measures on the syllabus, you can ask these questions. You can have them go hunt through the syllabus. And it's a little silly, it's a little goofy, but it is information that I want them to have, and it's information that will be useful to them going forward. I've also got, or I'm playing around with the idea of literally hiding Easter eggs on course content pages. So this is a screenshot from a course that I'm currently working on. You can see that I've embedded a YouTube video, and then there's a couple of links. And then there's also this little Easter egg off to the side. I just picked an image and put it on Canvas and sized it down. Now, if I turn that into a button, which I plan to do, or I have done, then when students hover over it, they can tell that it's a link. And if they click it, then they're going to be able to see a secret extra credit page. As a reward for your close attention, you're invited to complete an extra credit assignment. I haven't figured all of that out yet. Again, this is something I'm just piloting, but I do kind of like the idea of hiding little things around your course pages for students to find. Very, very briefly, I'm going to talk through just a couple of hints and tips and better practices that I've found that may work for you or may not. I've found that it works a little bit better to wait a few days or weeks before introducing Easter eggs so that students can get used to what the class flow is otherwise going to be like. So they're not worried about all this extraneous stuff early on. It also tends to be, once you get a few days or weeks in, that tends to be when you are going to get a little bit more bored with the rhythms of class. So more fun to integrate something like an Easter egg then. I use them intermittently, not constantly. I like them to be things that can surprise students rather than something they're always constantly looking for, because I don't want it to feel like it's another assignment that they have to complete. I would highly recommend that if you're going to use Easter eggs, you try to integrate them in ways that are thematically appropriate and that are respectful to what you're doing. For me, doing chickens in a presentation about dietary practices made sense. I would not do an Easter egg in, for example, the days where I talk about Black liberation theology and the history of lynching in the United States. I want that course content to be engaged in a really serious and mindful way. So that's probably not a day that I would use an Easter egg, but you have a lot of options. I do think you should focus on whatever seems most fun for you, because we don't need extra work that's going to bog us down. If we're going to make extra work for ourselves, we should at least make it as fun as we can. And this is kind of my bigger takeaway. I really truly believe that anything that makes us as teachers or professors seem more approachable, or that helps students cope with stress, that those things are worthwhile, even if they're not immediately advancing towards your course goals or your learning outcomes. Because they're an intermediate step. They are a part of the process to get towards those learning outcomes. So yeah, you want them to be able to name a certain number of things or to be able to analyze different practices or whatever. But along the way, if you can keep them engaged, if you can help them think of you as an approachable professor, they're more likely to come to you when they are having trouble. So using techniques like Easter eggs that might be a little silly at times, I think can still absolutely be worth the time and effort because they're an intermediate step to accomplishing those course goals. So I'm just going to really quickly throw up questions for discussion because I want to get out of everybody's way if we have a little bit of time. There's a few questions that I have. I'm especially interested in folks who might be using or might be thinking about different levels of teaching and how these could be useful to you. But I will go ahead and just open it up. So if you have things to say, I'd appreciate if you can unmute your mic because I'm having a little bit of trouble figuring out how to see the comment box here. So what questions, curiosities, or comments are coming up right now?
Are you doing a session later today where you kind of talk about how you do this? Like with the, how did you insert the chicken into the slide and whatnot? I guess I think this is a really cool idea and something that I might want to try, but I'm just wondering, how do you do it now?
So good question. One, no, I'm not doing any more presentations later. Two, it's the easiest way, the way I've done everything is literally copy paste. So if I'm making a PowerPoint presentation and I want there to be a chicken in it, I copy it off of Google image search, I paste it into the presentation, and then, use the regular PowerPoint animations to make it come up when you want it to come up. And when it's stuff like buttons in Canvas, again, you can just grab images off of a Google image search and stick them in like you'd stick in, little Control V or Control C, then Control V, and put them onto the page that you're editing, shrink them to or size them however you like. And then when you click on them and you click on, a course page or a quiz or whatever, you can link them just like you would link text in Canvas. So yeah, and all of that probably was only minimally helpful because you're not seeing me do it. But I can at least assure you that the copy pasting part is not nearly as difficult as you might be thinking that it is.
That is a good way to get me started. Thank you.
Great.
Good morning. Thank you for the presentation. I think this would be perfect for Spanish class.
Oh, yeah.
Because, and my daughter has found Easter eggs in her video games sometimes. So this is just another way to incorporate, so I think that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a huge fan of gamification I also study video games and gaming as sort of a side project. So that probably gives you a little bit of an idea of where this all came from.
I also kind of wish you would give another presentation and walk us through all this, because that Easter egg with a link, my mind is just going crazy now, but I would like to have Easter eggs with maybe extra cultural information or extra background knowledge for my students.
Oh yeah, it was a friend of mine that taught me how to use buttons, or that's what she called them, where you literally just pull an image in, plop it in your Canvas page, and then when you click and highlight that image, you can link it to any other course page or any other quiz. Once I learned how to do that, I use them in everything. I mean, absolutely profoundly everything, because it also simplifies course pages a lot. Instead of just having giant blocks of text, you can have images here and there. So I don't know, perhaps you have also an instructional designer or someone who can talk you through a little bit of that, but it's honestly a really, really easy concept. It's just one that I never had thought to do until somebody taught me how to do it.
I think that's going to be my project for my first work day on Monday.
Hey, there you go.
I have a quick question for you, Emily. Have you found, I'm looking at the second question here, what are your biggest worries or concerns? And especially with the text Easter eggs, have you found that multilingual learners ever struggle with those as far as like finding the information, or if they happen to find it when they're just reading through the syllabus that they get confused about, well, what does the fact that our house is blue have to do with any of this? But do you find that students ever struggle with that?
For the time, that is one that I've only used a couple of times. And as far as I was able to tell, I didn't see any difference between my folks who spoke more than one language and the folks who just had English. But that does raise a really valid concern and a really important concern about content. I do try, especially with something like the syllabus, I will sometimes frame that out. And I also tried with, for example, the assignment page. I didn't let them have access to it until they also had access to the instructions that included the thing about, why the house is blue. I did actually have one student email me and said, oh, I thought that was a really weird typo, but now I know. And she was really excited about it, honestly. But yeah, I think that's an important concern, and one That I would probably approach with trying to make sure there's extra framework in place so that they know these kinds of things might pop up, or even just saying at the beginning of a class, you know, I like to put fun little things around to find. They might be useful to you later, so that you kind of avoid some of that confusion. But yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up.
Sure.
All right. Well, we are at 10:15, and we have about a 15-minute break between sessions. If there are any lingering questions, I'm happy to have people stick around for the time being, and Q&A can continue if Emily's open to that.
Fantastic.
But we will have the next session starting in 15 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording right now for this session, and we'll start it up for the next one.
Thanks, Stephen.